The scraping of a trowel slicing through soil rang out in the early Portland dawn. An old man hunched over the community garden, planting seedlings with a bent back, and from behind him came a mocking whistle through the fence. "Grandpa, what? Do you think this is a battlefield?" He didn't answer. He simply scattered another handful of seeds. No one knew he'd once been a Marine. No one knew he'd saved an entire warship from starvation with a self-designed food preservation system. To this neighborhood, he was just the crazy old guy who liked playing in the dirt. Who is he? Why did an action ridiculed as foolish become the inspiration for a national farming initiative? And what buried tremor has been set loose by these first seeds of mustard greens? All right, my dear viewers, prepare for a story that will leave you speechless. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly connect with what I'm sharing here. And drop a comment below to tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. It's always thrilling to see people joining us from every corner of the globe. Each dawn, while the city still dozes and dew beads the edges of leaves, in a small corner of East Portland, Oregon, an old man bends over a row of carrots. No signposts, no banners, no community call to action, just an empty patch of ground beside the Maple Park basketball court. Once overrun by knee-high weeds, plastic litter scattered along the curb as if nobody cared to tidy up. He is Edward Brooks, 77 years old. No one recalls exactly when he first appeared. No one knows how long he's lived here. Every day, he shows up, silently, steadily, in worn rubber boots and a faded cap bearing the logo of a long-defunct baseball team. In his hand, a tarnished seed packet and a few old gardening tools, a chipped hoe, a rusty watering can, and an aluminum lunchbox wrapped in a handkerchief. He doesn't ask for assistance. He doesn't write grant proposals. He posts nothing online. He needs no one's help. Day after day, he tills the soil, pulls the weeds, plants the seedlings. Industrious, quiet, so persistently that people sometimes wonder, why is he doing this, and to what end? The neighborhood children don't question much. They simply watch and laugh, calling the patch the crazy old man's garden, an innocent nickname dripping with subtext. They see him hunched over, spreading organic compost, laying straw mulch to retain moisture, staking thin wires to keep feral cats from digging. The same actions repeated, without a word. To them it seems either a strange habit or, worse, the sign of a loneliness gone mad. The adults split in two. Some pass by, eyes soft with pity, feeling sorry for an old man trying to fill the void of old age with nameless chores. Others whisper that he must have too much time on his hands, putting on a show. That plot of land isn't his. Does he even have permission to cultivate it? Yet amid that thoughtless passers-by crowd, a few begin to take notice. The barren beds now sprouting green shoots, the dark, crinkled leaves of kale rising day by day, tomatoes blooming, pumpkins sprawling across the ground. And most striking of all, the pungent aroma of cilantro, planted thick along the fence line, as though he used that gentle fragrance to shield the garden from the neighborhood's prejudiced gaze. No one asks why he does it. No one asks who he is, or used to be. In a community accustomed to forgetting and to turning a blind eye, people assume that whoever lives in silence has nothing worth remembering. They do not know, and perhaps do not care, that this bent figure lifting each sprout once trembled in icy winds to sow shipboard greens. that those wrinkled, calloused hands once managed food preservation systems for hundreds of sailors aboard the USS Cumberland during a 218-day voyage without port calls, that he once stood amid the engine roar of a warship's hold, monitoring humidity, adjusting temperature thresholds to keep vegetables from spoiling, and to keep his crew alive. But Edward never speaks of it. He has never told this story to the children, to the adults, or to local authorities. To him, the past remains behind distant waves. Now, for him, planting is no longer a naval duty. It is another form of service, more silent, more enduring. No metal lights, no bugle calls, only earth, seeds, and hope. Each tender sprout is an answer. Each leaf rising from the soil affirms that, even when forgotten, the values of perseverance and care can bloom in silence. He needs no one to speak of him, no one to call him a veteran, no one to honor him. He needs only a patch of clean earth, a handful of healthy seeds, and a reason to carry on. And as he always has, he works quietly, diligently, without needing anyone to watch. The scrape of a trowel cutting through soil echoed in the early Portland sunshine. Mr. Brooks bent over, pulling the drip lines snug around the newly rooted bok choy. The earth still damp from last night's light rain, and he was fine-tuning the water flow, neither too much nor too little. Everything had to be just right. But that laugh, sudden, tearing through the air like an invisible slash, made him pause for a heartbeat. A group of young people passed by, each clutching a coffee cup 3 times the size of their hand, steam still drifting from their lips. They didn't speak to him. They spoke about him, loud enough for every word to land. "Look at him! Thinks he's a soldier in a war." Then they giggled, quickened their pace, never glancing back. Mr. Brooks did not look up. His hand remained on the soil, deftly adjusting the trickle of water at each stem. The sunlight glinted off his bent back, illuminating the faded brown of his well-washed shirt. He was accustomed to such reactions, not quite cruelty, but far from kindness. A careless dismissal that modern life often reserves for anything slow, anything old, anything out of fashion. A week later, a flyer appeared on the community bulletin board outside the park. A stark white sheet printed in bold black letters. Unpermitted garden at risk of city code violation. No signature, no contact number, just a cold warning. And no one removed it. No one objected. Even those who once quietly harvested free produce from his wooden basket, packed with kale, parsley, and the occasional pumpkin, said nothing. An elderly neighbor who once gratefully asked for cilantro for her soup now merely hurried past, avoiding his eyes, pretending not to know him. A park official finally told him bluntly, "We've received complaints. You should stop before you're cited." Mr. Brooks simply nodded, offered no resistance, made no excuses, then turned and continued his work as though no words had been spoken. His hands sifted the soil, plucked away a drooping leaf, added straw mulch around the tender tomato seedlings. That silence, his refusal to argue, to beg, to rage, made many uncomfortable. They couldn't understand why a man in his 70s, hair nearly white, back already bent, would patiently tend each tiny sprout. No one paid him, no one thanked him, yet every day he returned. Once, some children playing ball snapped a tomato plant in half. The stray ball struck the row. The young stem flopped over, leaves scattering. They laughed, calling it the little earthquake. He did not scold, did not scowl. He walked over, gently tied the stem with a slender cord, braced it with a bamboo stake, uttered not a single complaint. But in his eyes that day lay something deeper than sadness or hurt, something more patient, more enduring, as though a broken stem was exactly the moment the plant needed to learn to stand again. They will never know, and perhaps they never will, that this man once spent 11 straight hours in a freezing hold on the USS Cumberland when the ship's preservation system failed. At sea, no power, no time for repairs. When the cold store broke down and the officers' rations were at risk of spoiling, he was the only one who dared enter that freezer's heart. With his hands, his memory, his steadfast will, he manually rationed meals to hundreds. No complaint, no desire for recognition. He did not die of the cold. He survived it, for principle's sake. That day he voiced no protest. And now, when a plant snaps, or when someone deems him in violation, he still utters no complaint. For he understands, some things, once rooted in the heart, need no validation to become a value. What he guards, the principle, the loyalty to a way of life. What they damage is only the surface soil. One rainy April afternoon, after days of drought, the ground lay waterlogged, slippery, and cold. Yet Mr. Brooks still came to the garden as always, carrying a worn tarpaulin, its edges frayed, its folds etched by time. He stepped into that small patch of soil where the young seedlings had sprouted less than a week ago. Without hesitation, he began to shield each row with the tarp, propping it up on makeshift wooden stakes to keep the rain from washing away the thin layer of earth. He said nothing. He looked around at nothing. He waited for no praise. To him, that fresh green life was worth protecting. No matter that no one else cared, no matter that tomorrow someone might pull it up and toss it aside. Today, it was life, and he guarded it as one guards a memory nobody wants to recall. Just a few meters away, under the shelter of a bus stop awning, stood a man escaping the rain. Mike Langston, over 40, stocky, sharp-eyed, owned a small organic farm on the city's outskirts. A former military medic turned part-time farmer to support his 2 children, he didn't know Mr. Brooks. Yet in that moment, he couldn't tear his gaze from the old figure, bent over to shield a tiny pumpkin plant barely the size of a teaspoon. Mike wondered why a man of that age, in such weather, would silently tend the garden. No one paid him. No acknowledgments awaited him. No one asked for his help, and he seemed to need nothing in return. That silent, decisive action, without explanation, compelled Mike to pull out his phone. He recorded a short clip. No effects, no zoom, no narration. Just a few seconds of Mr. Brooks stooped low, sheltering the small plant as though afraid it might fall. Mike added a simple caption before posting. They laughed at him. But did anyone ask why a man his age still works the garden every day, without fail? #grow for glory. At first, the video drew only a handful of likes from the small farming community, some words of encouragement, a few shares. But less than 48 hours later, something surprising happened. A group of Marine veterans, seeing the hashtag, shared the clip with the comment, "We recognize that stance." Then, a food preservation professor at Oregon State University identified the man in the video, tagging Edward Brooks in a 1982 paper that referenced an Army engineer who developed an emergency food storage chamber for the USS Jefferson. Within hours, a local news outlet dug into the story, cross-checking service records, matching photographs. Official confirmation followed. Edward Brooks was indeed the engineer who designed the Jefferson's backup food preservation system in 1975, a scheme that kept the ship operational for 7 months through dangerous waters without resupply. The story exploded. No longer just a hastily shot clip, no longer just a quiet hashtag. Now, hashtag Grow for Glory spread across Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. News sites covered it. Environmental activists shared it. The online community and dubbed him the soldier who sows seeds. Those who once gathered free greens from his roadside basket returned, asking his name for the first time. A little boy even brought a handwritten sign. "I don't know who you are, sir, but thank you for growing vegetables for my mom." A woman who once avoided him now stood quietly by the garden's edge, nodding deeply as he passed. The community's voice rose, not in shouts, but in a ripple of small gestures that swept through the neighborhood. Then, the unexpected happened. A group of Marine veterans, who had never met him, sent an official petition to the Department of Defense. In their letter, they wrote just one line: "He needs no accolades, but we need to honor him." Dear viewers, relax for a moment, or sip a glass of water, and stay tuned for the next surprising turn in this story. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from every corner of the globe. Comment 1 if you enjoyed this story so we can keep bringing you more. Monday morning, Mr. Brooks arrived at Maple Park as usual, his old shirt tossed on, his boots still caked with last week's mud. He knelt by the cucumber bed, scooping handfuls of compost around each stem, his eyes fixed on the damp soil. Every movement was slow, deliberate, as though he and this plot of earth spoke to one another without words. Everything seemed ordinary until the distant rumble of engines. Not a car, not a delivery truck. A deep, steady rhythm, familiar from a past no one ever mentions. He looked up. From the main road, 3 olive-drab military vehicles rolled into the neighborhood. No sirens, no flashing lights, no banners or fanfare. They followed one another in silent procession, wheels gliding over the pavement without a single bump. Neighbors gathered. Some stood in silence. Others lifted phones to live stream, eyes wide with questions. Why the military? Why here? And for whom? The lead vehicle stopped at the park's edge. Its door opened, and a man in full uniform stepped out. Navy Rear Admiral James K. Merritt, his coat crisp, medals glinting under the astonished gazes of onlookers. He said nothing. He smiled not. His gaze fixed on the little garden at the far edge of the lawn, just soil, a few half-grown rows, and one silver-haired man standing amid the cilantro and celery. No loudspeaker, no music, no introductions. Without fanfare, Admiral Merritt walked toward the garden and halted before Mr. Brooks, leaving just enough space for decorum. No word was spoken. He simply raised his hand in a formal salute, solemn, precise, devoid of ceremony. Mr. Brooks remained still. Seconds passed. Then, slowly, he set aside his trowel. His right hand rose, steady, unfaltering, to return the salute. His motion lacked the swiftness of old, but his eyes shone with the same former spirit. Those gathered didn't fully grasp the moment, but veterans among them did. They saw what others could not merely a salute between ranks, but a gesture of profound respect, reserved for those who have borne burdens few understand. Still, no speech, no citation, no recitation of past deeds. Admiral Merritt signaled to an aide, who approached and unrolled a set of blueprints before Mr. Brooks. The plans detailed each element: a modern community farm, solar power arrays, a water recycling station, and a food storage warehouse. laid out precisely on the land Mr. Brooks had tended day after day. Not a single word named him, yet every line on that blueprint began where he stood. He asked no questions. He gave no answer. His gaze lingered on those printed rows of tiny gardens, sketched in pale pencil, longer than anywhere else. Perhaps he saw something there. Perhaps he needed no more. The Admiral inclined his head, voice quiet but clear. We're not building this for you. We're building this because of you. Because of the seeds you planted that reminded America of service without a stage. No one spoke further. Mr. Brooks remained where he stood, neither smiling nor. 2 months after that silent convoy of military vehicles came and went, the vacant lot beside Maple Park was no longer forgotten, nor was it a makeshift patch with plastic drip lines and old compost bins. Now it bore an official name, Brooks Community Agri-Station, the community farm station named for the man who once quietly sowed seeds there, unnoticed by all. They did not tear it out. They kept the low wooden fence he'd built with bare hands, originally only to mark the edge of his beds. It was simply repainted, not sanded smooth. They preserved its rugged charm. The first row of mustard greens, the ones grown from nameless perseverance, now lay protected under a transparent cover, as if on display. A small brass plaque stood before it, the inscription crisp, Mr. Edward Brooks's first row, where an idea was sown, not for fame, but for duty. No empty rhetoric, no grandiloquence, only words true to the man himself. The farm complex now runs on modern solar power. Programmable drip irrigation lines water the beds. The food storage warehouse is built to the very specifications he once used in the Navy. Insulation layers, airflow channels, humidity controls, all drawn from his 1975 shipboard schematics. Mr. Brooks no longer hands-on every board and brick, yet he is not sidelined. He is invited to advise on every detail, each vent cover, each warehouse wall. Every question is met with his calm certainty. He does not stand above the work. He sits beside them, flipping through his notes, pointing to figures. And they listen, not because he's famous, but because he knows. Each morning, he still arrives. His old seed satchel still hangs at his side. Less full now, but still enough. He still plants each seed, but today, many hands plant alongside him. Children line up to learn seed sowing. Some are new. Others smile as they remind him of last week's lesson. Adults divide the tasks. Some loosen the soil, some distribute the harvest. And most remarkable of all are those who once mocked him, who snapped his photo or sneered as they passed, now approaching, nodding respectfully, and asking softly for a handful of spinach. At the main entrance, a large sign was installed, bearing his name in bold letters. It was the one thing he protested, not out of modesty, but because he saw no need. The Veterans Council would not budge. They left only one note behind. No one needs to know he's a hero, but they must remember why we still have clean vegetables to eat, even when society's trust seemed in decay. There was no grand opening, no red ribbon, no speeches, no addresses, just a Saturday morning like any other. People came to work. Children ran about. Mr. Brooks sat on an unassuming wooden bench, neither new nor old, hands resting on his knees, watching a group of youths erect a new trellis for cucumbers. His gaze was no longer weighed down as before, still deep, but gentler. His back, bent through the years, remained unchanged, but now he was not alone. By day's end, the sun stood high. Light danced off the panels lining the warehouse roof, reflected onto the onions below. A single ray struck the ground, touching the hand of a boy watering the beds. The boy looked up at him, a familiar face, once the child who shyly asked for radishes, who once watched from afar. He whispered, voice barely more than breath, "I want to grow those greens for my whole class." Mr. Brooks said nothing. He only nodded. Nothing more was needed. His nod was continuation itself. For what he did was never meant for recognition. It was simply to sow an act of kindness into the earth, and to trust that someday someone would pick it up and plant it again. Every afternoon, Edward Brooks sat on the wooden bench placed against the garden fence, not to guard it, nor to watch anyone, but to observe. It had become an inseparable part of his life. He once monitored power systems running through hundreds of devices in a ship's hold. Now he watched life pass through this garden, a rhythm he could not control, yet understood down to its roots. He watched the children jostle for the watering hose as if it were the day's greatest game. One lad scooped water, while another stealthily swapped seedlings. Older kids took on the air of teachers for the younger ones. None noticed him seated there, but he knew they had grown accustomed to his presence as though he were an essential part of this place. He watched an elderly woman quietly approach the gate. Without a word, without a greeting, she left a bag of greens on the doorstep of the house next door, then slipped away quickly, as if not wanting to be seen. No one spoke her name. No one demanded thanks. Yet he saw it all, and he understood. Some choose to love without being present. He watched those who once passed this garden without a glance now linger a moment longer. They said nothing, simply bent to pull a weed or pick up a stray bag of trash. They offered no explanation, needed none. Their actions were apology enough, and their way of relearning what someone had silently sown. He did not use a phone. He did not scroll social media. He did not need to read comments. Yet he knew the hashtag #GrowForGlory still thrived everywhere, pinned to seed planting tutorials, stamped on food distribution crates, echoed in veterans' memorial speeches. He had not sought any of it, yet he did not deny it. For he understood. Sometimes a story need not be told in words, but by the way it lives on, in the deeds of others. One Sunday morning, he entered the garden as usual, bent to check soil moisture, swept a vine off a tomato stem, when his eyes caught sight of a newly erected wooden sign. The wood was fresh, the carving deep. Plant not for fame, plant with kindness, where there is ground to sow. He did not startle. He asked no one who had made it. He showed no emotion. He read it, stood quietly for a moment, then gently drove another stake nearby to support the vine's weight, as if that were the task truly worthy of his attention. The neighbors grew familiar with the sight. Each morning, an old man circling the garden, unhurried, unpressured, inspecting every leaf. Sometimes he lifted a stone and placed it just so. Sometimes he reminded someone to space their plants more widely, to prevent root rot, and then slipped away as though he'd never been there. They did not know that this man had served on the longest Pacific crossings. They did not know he once managed the entire food supply for hundreds in conditions where one mistake would collapse the system. They only knew him as the one who carried a tattered seed bag and touched the earth each day. And they did not realize that what he was sowing today was not just vegetables, but memories, dignity, a silent reminder that some values must never fade, even when we stop naming them. As evening fell, he still sat alone on that wooden bench, hands still stained with soil, unwashed. No one came near, no one recorded it, no one wrote a story. But for those who had walked past his garden, received a handful of greens from his hand, heard him say, "Good soil takes time." His presence was irreplaceable. No title was needed, no honors. He existed as part of this land, reminding us that kindness is not for show, but for living through the actions we choose each day. Some people need no accolades, for their silent presence is the greatest reminder of all. There are seeds that, once sown in the earth, sprout in silence. No stage lights, no applause, yet one day they grow into shade for the whole community. Edward Brooks needs no honor, but an entire generation has grown up on the quiet he planted. This story is not only about leafy greens, or a community farm, or a solitary old man. It is a reminder that, across America, there are still those who serve quietly, not for money, not for fame, but for the belief in what is right. Thank you for joining us. Don't forget to let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. It's always wonderful to see people joining us from every corner of the globe. Comment 1 if you enjoyed this story so we can keep bringing you more.